All right, today we'll be working on the 2006 Pleasureway again. About a year ago or a little more, I did the rear suspension and increased the leaf pack from a 3-leaf pack. I think I now got 6 leaves in total. Really helped the handling on this van, and so far it's been driving well. And now I've got a few thousand more miles on it. I'm starting to notice the front tires are cupping. It's a little hard to see in this, but I'm getting some uneven cupping wear. So it's kind of indicating I've got some issues up in the front too, even though it's been driving fine. So today I'm gonna do a front suspension rebuild with all the, changing all the bushings, ball joints, and the steering linkages, and see if we can get that fixed. The shocks are brand new, so that's not really the issue. I've got some undesirable movement somewhere else causing that tire to cup. So I've got all my parts over here. I've got the new steering linkages. I've got some new springs. These springs are about 25 or 30% stiffer than the factory springs, and I'm doing that to account for the weight of the RV build and to hopefully get a little bit of lift out of the front end. I've got the new ball joints here. Those are the part numbers. The big ones are the lowers. The smaller ones are the uppers. These here are just some spring isolators. This little rubber part that goes under the spring, and all new bushing kits. So get there so you can see the part numbers on those. These bushings are for the radius arms, the sway bars, and the I-beams, that pivot from the center of the van, and then a few extra packs of grease because they never give you enough grease with these bushings. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so I've got it up on jack stands now. I removed the sway bar, though I made a little mistake with the jack stand placement. I can't get the sway bar out, but that shouldn't be a problem because I'm planning on taking these whole radius arms out, or the I-beams and the radius arms. And the reason I'm doing that is I've watched quite a few other videos of people trying to change the bushings out and these bushings here, and if you try to do it all in place, it's a real challenge. So I'm going to try a bit of a different method where I'll take the entire things out, because I also have to replace the bushings that are at the pivot points there, and to do that while it's all on the van is really tricky. So I'm going to try a different method, like I said, and take the whole things out the way I can do it in the shop, hopefully. Yeah, so first thing I did was remove the sway bar. It's just 2 bolts here, and the same thing on the other side. And then I've removed the tie rods. It's a 21 millimeter bolt, and there's a castle nut on there with a cotter pin. So remove the cotter pin, take the nut off the end, hit this with a big hammer, it vibrates, and that will just pop loose. Did the same thing on the other side. I will be replacing this steering linkage also, so you'll see that when we get there. Okay, so I've got the I-beams and the radius arms out now, and I think the kit that I have, this is the sway bar bushing. I need to just get the rubber piece out and leave the metal sleeve in. And then this is the pivot bushing in the center of the van. It's pretty shot, so I think it may be the same thing. I may need to just try to get the rubber out and leave the outer sleeve. And then on the radius arm, we'll be replacing those bushings as well. All right, so apologies for not filming this section. This was a little bit tricky work, but I can describe what was done. So I removed, as I said, the radius arms and the I-beams here all the way. So there's the I-beams are held by that bolt in the center, and there's just one nut on the back of this radius arm. I did learn that a few things. That this gray colored spacer is required to be put back in. I tried it without it just to see what would happen, and there was the nut was bottoming out against where the threads end before there was full compression in the bushings, so I had to put that spacer back in. I've seen quite a few folks on YouTube kind of debate whether that's needed or not. In my experience, it seems that it is needed. That way you can get compression on the bushings. Let's see. After installing the bushings on that side where this I-beam goes in, it was a pretty tight fit to get in there, so it was a little tricky to get the bolt holes to align. I had to use the jack to kind of press the I-beam up into that bracket. Sorry, it's not focused there, up into the bracket there. So you just use the jack from the underside, you can press it in there, and it's a really good thing that it's a tight fit with those poly bushings. You don't want to have excessive play in there, so I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. You also want to make sure that you're greasing anywhere where those poly bushings contact the metal with that grease that they provide. Otherwise you'll get some pretty nasty squeaks with these poly bushings. In my previous segment, I misspoke. This sway bar bushing originally had a metal sleeve on it, and the instructions for the bushings say to leave the sleeves in. However, the dimensions of the bushing don't work out for that. So I removed the metal sleeve and the dimensions are perfect. So you can see on this side, the bushing is fully through and the flange is sitting perfectly in the I-beam. And the same thing on this side, there's a little flange on the bushing that's lining up perfectly. So for the sway bar bushings, you do need to remove the sleeve, at least for this particular brand of bushings. But on the center pivot bushing, you need to leave the metal sleeve in, which is a bit challenging. You have to cut the old rubber bushings out, which is a real pain. I ended up using a drill to drill through the rubber, kind of, I don't know, 10, 15 different places, and then kind of run the drill around the bushing, and then I had to clean up all the rubber that was kind of fused to the to that sleeve. So anyway, the pivot one, you need to leave the sleeve on. For the sway bar, the sleeve needed to come out. I also got the new springs installed, and this side is nearly ready to go. I'll head over into the garage and show you the ball joints. All right, so I've got the spindle here with the new ball joints in. The ball joints were also a bit challenging. If you do go to the auto parts store, I went to O'Reilly's in particular to rent the ball joint tools. This is the main ball joint kit. You also need to get this other one. It's called the master ball joint set. I found that you need both of these in order to do this work. There's probably some way you could get it done with just the one kit, but it would be easier if you have this other one with all these extra sleeves. I had to get a little creative with how to use all those sleeves to press these in and out with the ball joint press here. It's important that you put the C-clip back on after this is installed, and then these particular ones came with these grease fittings that need to be installed separately as well. The upper ball joint on the original Ford one did not have the C-clip, and this one also will not have it. There is a groove inside where a C-clip could fit, but with the dimensions of this, the C-clip is not visible anymore, and that's the way the factory one was. That's the way this one is. I'm just gonna leave it like that. I did get the brake disc pretty greasy with my gloves and stuff, so after I put this back on the vehicle, I'll need to clean all that off with you know, some brake clean, just to get all that grease off the brakes before I install it back again. One other note is that you'll see on a lot of these videos that people take the brake disc off, and then you have to start dealing with the bearings that are inside there and the grease and everything that's inside. Repack the bearings with grease. I found that's not required to do the ball joints. What you can do is there's the speed sensor wire. It's just a clip fitting like that, so you can just unclip it and take the whole thing into your shop with you. I find that to be a little easier than trying to mess with those bearings. Okay, so I've got the I-beam out here, and so I cut the rubber out of this bushing. This is the pivot bushing in the center of the van, and you want to leave the metal sleeve in for this one. The dimensions of this work out just perfectly to fit there, and this comes in two parts. So the sleeve part and this part. And so once you press this in there, you want to make sure that this goes on, and that'll be a real nice tight fit in the bracket and the frame. You want to grease this all up and grease the inside with that super grease they give you. And to press these in, I found just using a bolt and some thick washers works pretty well. And then you get it started with that, and then there'll be a little bit of room to go, and then I just hit it with a hammer after that and press it all the way in. I'll show you that when I rig it up. Now on this side, there's the sleeve, and I've sprayed it with some penetrating oil, letting it sit there, and then I'll just hammer it out from this side to get that entire metal sleeve out. And the new sway bar bushings fit in there perfectly without the sleeve. All right, so this is that sleeve for the sway bar bushing. So I was able to use the ball joint press in a more controlled way than trying to hit it out with a hammer. Seemed to work pretty well. So now it's partially out on this side, and hopefully I'll be able to use a pry bar just to grab that ledge there and slide it the rest of the way out. Okay, so it was a bit challenging, but I was able to use the pry bar to get that sleeve out, and now we'll be able to put this new sway bar bushing directly into the I-beam. Okay, so we've got our new sway bar bushing here. We're gonna want to make sure that that's nice and greased all around. We'll make sure we get these flanges. May have mentioned this before, but these kits usually don't come with enough grease to do the job, so you want to buy a couple extra packets. And we'll get that all nice and spread out. Okay, and now we'll set up our press rig here. So it's just the bolt, the washers, and the nut. Oops. Get it hand tight first. Okay, then you kind of want to make sure that that bolt is pretty straight in there. the ratchet, and this side with the wrench. And I just tighten down. Kind of want to make sure that it's staying mostly centered. Sometimes it'll get off center, but that's all right. Don't try to focus too much on it, because if you just keep cranking down, it'll eventually slip in there. All right, so now it's slipped in. We're doing pretty good. All right, and that's about as far as we can go. We'll back it off and then finish the rest of the way with a hammer or something if it's required. Okay, so I've got it in there and I realized I made a mistake. I forgot to grease the steel. So don't make that mistake. The back side of my bushing here, or this would actually be the front side where the sway bar goes in, is a little bit damaged along the flange because I didn't grease the that front edge of the steel. So don't make that mistake, but this side looks pretty good. You can see it fits nicely on the flange, and it's the exact right dimensions without that sleeve where the flange is now mating pretty nicely here, other than it got a little damaged because I didn't grease it right. So yeah, don't make that mistake. But yeah, if the flange was still in here, that metal sleeve, this would not fit. Now on the other side, we'll do the same thing with the bolt and washer method to press this bushing in. And this next bushing is directional, so you want to make sure that you've got it in the right way per the instructions. Okay, so I've got this one all mounted up here. The instructions show that you want this flange and this flange to be mated up on the bushing and the metal sleeve. This time I greased the inside of the metal sleeve as well to prevent the mistake I made last time. So we'll just go ahead and press this back in, and should be good to go on this one. Okay, so because there's a metal sleeve inside of this bushing, with the washer method you'll eventually end up with a point you can't go any further. So I'm going to rig up the ball joint press here to continue pressing this one in. Okay, we're almost there. With the wrench a little. All right, then we're there. All right, so now this flange is mated up with the main flange. We're pretty close to it, and we should be good to go. Okay, and before you put it back in the van, make sure you get this other piece. That's that second part to go on the other side. A little bit of rubber will be sticking out, and then this mates on the rubber with this angle going towards the mounting bracket in the van. Now this should be a pretty tight fit to get in that mounting bracket in the van. So what I found on the last one was it was best to kind of get it into place and then use the jack to kind of press it in there. All right, so moving on to the steering linkages here. In the Trying to get this one out of the van was a little tricky. This center stud there didn't want to come out, so I had to go to the auto parts store and get the tie rod puller. That came out just fine using the tie rod puller. I found it's pretty difficult to line these up, so I found it was a little easier to take measurements from the end of the tie rod to this center bolt here and try to get them to match up. That way the toe is reasonable when it's at a reasonable place to start for the alignment. I also found that this is a Moog part, that there's really not that much grease in here. So after I put it on the van, I'm gonna go ahead and grease these all up. Looks like they didn't really put very much grease in them from the factory. Same is true for the ball joints too. I'm gonna go ahead and put some more grease in there too. Those looked a little light on grease from the factory. All right, apologies, I'm going a little out of order here, but we're back on the I-beams, and I'm reinstalling the passenger side right now. So as I said, with those new bushings, it's a pretty tight fit into that frame bracket. So I actually had to get a pry bar and expand those just a tad, the width, and then you use the jack to get it up in there. And once you get it pretty close, you can stick like an aligning pin in there to get the holes aligned, and then we'll be able to slip that bolt right through. Okay, we're looking at that same bolt from a different view now, and it's important to put that bolt back the same way that it was before, where you're sticking it in from the rear towards the front. And the reason for that is this other I-beam crosses that path, and it's possible they may hit if you put the bolt in the opposite way. So you want to have that nut on the front side. Okay, this is now several weeks later since I've done the work, and I've driven the van probably 100 miles or so, and I can say that it's definitely an improvement in all the steering feel and the ride with the stiffer springs. And I'll just go over a few kind of lessons I learned from the job. Apologies I didn't film putting it all back together. I was getting a little late in the day and just wanted to finish. So, but I figure if you could do all that and get to this point, you could put it all back together. So yeah, I did get the lift that I was looking for. I forgot to take measurements before I started, but it's definitely riding a bit higher with the stiffer springs, and the ride is much improved with the stiffer springs. One challenge though with that is with the lift, it's hard to get it aligned. The way the geometry of those I-beams work, if you raise the resting ride height, it also changes the camber adjustments, right? It's kind of the wheel and the I-beams are together, so if you lower the resting position of the I-beams, the camber also changes. So my alignment is slightly off. I think it's like a ½ degree off from where it should be on the camber adjustment, and that's a result of the springs putting that ride height a little bit higher. Anyway, we'll just have to live with that. And if you do that too, you also have to get, there's I'm trying to remember the name of them, but it's like a cam bushing, where you can adjust the pitch of those knuckles, and that can help you out a little bit, but I put the largest ones in there with the highest degree of correction, and still just slightly off on the alignment. Let's see, the other thing I think I had mentioned previously is that for the steering linkages, all of these grease fittings, they did not come with, they were pretty dry. So you'll want to grease all of those, and the same thing with the ball joints, so you'll need a grease gun to do that. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with the results. It's driving and handling much better now, and the steering feel is greatly improved. Now, I only found in the process of doing this one of the ball joints was actually bad. The rest of them, while they were a little bit loose, there was nothing objectively wrong with them. But you can tell there's so many different joints in this linkage. There's 1, 2, 3, and a fourth one in the center that even with just a little bit of looseness and play in each one, it kind of multiplies across the entire linkage. So now that these are all tight, it's feeling much better. The same was true with the ball joints. They were all just slightly loose, and this fan has 140,000 miles on it. They were all just slightly loose, but again, it kind of multiplies. Any little bit of play gets multiplied across the entire system, and so having these all new is feeling a lot better.